A motion has been made and seconded that House Bill 436 be referred to the 14th order of business for possible amendments. A roll call vote has been requested and properly supported. Senator Zito is recognized to open debate on the motion. Senator Zito, excuse me, but would you turn your microphone on? You can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought maybe I was loud enough.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Madam President. I'll start over. My motion to move House Bill 436 to the 14th order is only to add grocery tax repeal. It's only to remove the tax on food. This amendment is in response to the desires of the citizens of the state of Idaho. The gentleman on the second floor has expressed support for the repeal of the tax on food, the grocery tax. In my travels, the removing of this aggressive tax on food, the tax on groceries, is the most consistent topic of discussion. Our families deserve to have the relief that this amendment will bring, especially during a time of increasing inflation, which hits the pocketbook of our poorest families the hardest. Families working to feed their families, pay their bills, their taxes, and be good citizens deserve our help. Thank you, Madam President.
Is there further debate on the motion?
Madam President.
Senator Rice.
Madam President, this is a hostile attempt to amend the bill. When you go to the amending order, it's not limited to any one topic. You can get all sorts of different amendments, and it would be a bad move to do that at this time. Thank you, Madam President.
Is there further debate on the motion? Hearing none, Senator Zito is recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Madam President. That's all I have to say is, as I travel our state and I talk to people and I get emails, for years now, this is the most consistent topic of discussion. This is the most consistent ask from the people of this good state, and I just find it incumbent upon us to offer them that relief. Thank you, Madam President.
Debate being closed, the question is, shall House Bill number 436 be referred to the 14th order of business for possible amendments? The roll call vote has been requested. The Secretary will call the roll.
Hagenbrod? Anthon? No. Bayer? Blair? No. Burgoyne? Aye. Burtonshaw? No. Cook? Crabtree? Den Hartog? No. Grow? No. Guthrie? No. Harris? No. Hyder? No. Lakey? No. Lee? No. Lind? Lodge? No. Martin? No. Nelson? Nye? Patrick? No. Rice? No. Ricks? No. Riggs? No. Semmelroth? Souza? Stennett? Thane? No. Van Orden? No. Vick? No. Ward Engelking? Winder?
Madam President, 60 seconds.
Senator Winder has 60 seconds.
Thank you. I'm going to vote no against this because the people that support this don't realize that if you do this, you're going to get a tax increase. What you're hearing from the public is they want to keep the tax credit and get rid of the sales tax. If you get rid of the credit, people are going to get an increase in taxes. They just don't understand it. The proper move is to increase the credit. And I vote no.
Senator Winder votes nay.
Wintrow? Woodward? No. Zito?
You can't debate. Sorry. You can't debate. Senator Zito votes aye.
Bayer? Lind?
Roll call shows 8 ayes, 26 nays, 1 absent and excused. Having failed to achieve a majority vote, the motion to send House Bill 436 to the 14th order has failed. The Senate now has before it for final consideration House Bill number 436. The Secretary will read the bill.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill 436 by Revenue and Taxation Committee, an act relating to income tax, to revise provisions regarding income tax.
Madam President.
Senator Rice.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of House Bill 436 be dispensed with, that the journal show that it has been read at length, section by section, and placed before the Senate for final consideration.
You've heard the unanimous consent request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, it is so ordered, and Senator Rice is recognized to open debate.
Madam President, this bill does two things. It takes and reduces the tax rates. We go from 5 brackets to 4. Those brackets would be at 1%, 3%, 4.5%, and 6%. Reduces the corporate income tax rate from 6.5% to 5%, so that it's the same. The other thing it does is it takes $350 million of the accumulated one-time funds that the state has this year and gives them back to Idaho taxpayers. What it does on that, 12% of your 2020 state income tax, or $75 per person that receives the grocery credit, whichever is higher. That's what our citizens will have returned to them. This reduction in the rate of income tax will make us more competitive as a state when people and businesses both are looking at our state as a place to come to. It helps with our job creation, and this is a good thing to do, especially in a circumstance where we have revenues that have a 24% increase year over year, rather than what we had been seeing at 5.7. This is a good bill. It does provide real tax relief. I would note that Boise State does a public policy survey every year. This year, they asked Idaho citizens, if the budget surplus is used for tax relief, what kind of tax relief will make the most difference for Idaho citizens? And that survey, there were 2 categories that were virtually identical. Property tax was at 37.7%. Income tax was 37.4%. The number that responded sales tax was 19.6%. That difference of 0.3% between property tax and income tax is 1/10 of the margin of error in the survey. So our citizens, when looking at the surplus that we're running, they want 2 kinds of tax relief, primarily property and income. This gives them the income tax relief. There are other bills that will provide property tax relief that have already started working their way through, and some that are yet to be introduced. This does match up with what Idaho citizens think is important, and I would ask for your aye vote on this bill. Thank you, Madam President.
Is there further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you. If you give me just one moment, I closed my window too quickly. So fellow senators, it's fine to see all of us here today and starting to debate bills. It's a pleasure to be starting to do that. We have a huge surplus this year, a confusing surplus, I would say, and I do agree that tax relief should be part of our solution. But I do object I'm not in agreement with this bill and doing it so early in the year. The financial picture is confusing. We have an acronym dollars washing around. We have acronym dollars washing around. We have ARPA, ESSER, IJU, and a lot of state general funds. And it's confusing how they are affecting income and sales tax collections. We have not yet passed any bills that are investing those dollars. And we have many places in Idaho that we would like to invest. And while I acknowledge the Boise State survey shows that property tax cuts and income tax cuts are equally popular in that survey, I have yet to have a citizen ask me for an income tax cut. And I have been bringing it up in town halls and forums. While I get property tax relief all the time, especially locally. Often I hear that the state doesn't pay property tax, and so we can't go at property tax relief because it's a function of local government. But I think that's only partially true. We set the rules on property tax rates, how it's collected, and we require many things of the local units of governments. And one thing I would like to focus on where I think we could execute property tax relief is if we would work harder on funding our schools. If we send more money down to the schools, we can reduce their supplemental levies, which are, on most of my constituents' property tax bill, the single biggest element in there. First of all, we could take a very simple step. We could send money down and ask the districts to just pay down their levy or use 75% of the money to pay down their levy. That would be effective, immediate property tax relief. We could also work harder on school facilities. We put the whole burden of paying for new and remodeled schools on our local units of our local schools, and we make it hard with a 2/3 vote. So if we had a matching fund that would match school bonds, that would reduce property taxes. And I would call your attention to the problem of school facilities that's been highlighted in the recent OPE study that was just released. And finally, I would acknowledge we're making efforts in these respects. I think in the coming days we'll debate another bill on insurance for teachers, and that will, I think, reduce the dependence on levies in our districts. And as we increase teachers' salary, like is being debated this year, that will have relief as well. So I encourage more of those kind of activities in the school. So I'm in favor of some tax reduction. I would like to be doing it later in the session, but I would be upfront. I don't want it to be the last thing we do. That's really problematic, and I'm not proposing that, but I'd like to see things a little farther evolved. And I'd like to see it I'd like more of a focus on one-time tax relief and not ongoing and taking that revenue stream out. And I'd rather do it for property taxes rather than income taxes. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Is there any further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam President. Senators, I feel compelled to offer a few comments and appreciate the indulgence of the Senate. You know, one thing I've learned about the legislative process is you don't always get everything you want in a bill, and sometimes you see things you'd rather not see in a bill. So that's the legislative process. And on bills with big, broad sweeping changes, that is often the case. So you have to decide, is there enough good in there to get your vote to the finish line? And such is the case for me on 436. To illustrate a point, I want you to imagine, Senators, that you're really hungry. You're not just ordinary hungry, you're really hungry, and you've decided to do something you've never done before. You're going to go to a 5-star restaurant that's incredibly expensive, and you're going to spend more than you've ever spent on dinner. But once inside, you have a decision to make, because in this restaurant, you don't get to pick what will be served, and you must pay up front. You have folks telling you it's good, but it still requires a leap of faith. So you got two choices: take a chance on the unknown meal will be worth the price, or leave and wonder if you were right to avoid an unknown or if you missed an opportunity. So with 436, the most expensive tax cut in the history of Idaho, justified by the largest budget surplus we've ever known. And I'll tell you up front, with due respect and with great respect to those who have worked so hard on it, I probably would not have spent this much money this way. That said, I recognize the state should not just sit on the money either. And I'll only offer a couple examples. The most glaring source of angst for me is the $350 million for the one-time rebate. I think the shelf life of that kind of benefit and appreciation from the public is pretty short-lived. In fact, I can't remember what I got last year on my rebate. It's just something that I think a lot of people don't even know why they got it. I would sooner seen that money spent on one-time infrastructure needs for deferred maintenance on higher ed and K-12 facilities, or more importantly, maybe to front-end the funding on the $1.6 billion bonding authority for congestion mitigation so we don't have to borrow as much money. And I think relieving citizens of those financial burdens would have resulted in tax relief down the road as well. So like the decision on whether to pay for the fictitious meal I just described, voting on 436 takes a significant amount of trust. I must depend on the expertise of those who have analyzed the data and have access to financial information and projections that go well beyond the crystal ball that I have possession of. I am a little concerned about what may be a huge part of that $1.9 billion surplus, and what part of that's driven by federal dollars related to COVID, and I'm not sure we know exactly what that is. In fact, recognizing that the federal government dollars are borrowed and not real, I kind of almost put them under the category of as monopoly money. But we do have some ability to track the federal dollars that have come directly into the state, but we don't know exactly what's come in as a result of the billions of dollars that's come into the state to private citizens and businesses that's found their way back into our coffers from sales and income tax and by other means. And once that federal spigot dries up, what is the real state of our economy? And I'm not sure anybody knows that other than some projections based on history. And certainly our economy is strong right now. But if it sounds like I'm being overly cautious, let me just say that it's always been easier to do a tax cut than a tax hike. And I just hope we're not overspending our skis to the extent we have to make difficult tax policy decisions in the future, because we know that the economy is cyclical and history tells it ebbs and flows, and at some point it will soften. Everything else aside, I firmly believe the windfall is not ours to keep as a state, nor should we. It's not appropriate to do so. And just like I can't order a la carte from the restaurant, I don't get to pick and choose everything I want to see on the menu of House Bill 436. So is it how I would draw it up? No. But last year I had a bill that I had a conversation on a bill with a senator that I have a great deal of respect for. And after some debate and back and forth, she finally got exasperated, and she'll know who she is. But she said very candidly, well, it's not Jim Guthrie perfect, but it's the bill before us. So on my meal, do I give the waiter or the waitress the credit card and tell them to bring the meal? Well, similar to this decision applies for 436, only it's a different form of payment is required, because in this case, the price of admission is my affirmative vote. So in spite of my reservations, it's an affirmative vote that I will make here in a few minutes when the Secretary calls the roll. And I'll place my trust and hope that we are spreading this windfall appropriately based on our needs as a state and out of fairness to our citizens. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam
Is there
President.
further debate? Senator Ward Engelking.
Thank you, Madam President, to debate the bill. And, I think I'm standing here representing those people that are looking through the window of that restaurant that Senator from 28 is describing. They don't have the price of that restaurant, and so they're standing outside. And to be real honest, I do believe a tax cut is it's certainly acceptable, and it's something we ought to be doing. But I think that in these times, we ought to be looking at what really will immediately benefit the people of Idaho. And so, in my mind, that's repealing the grocery tax credit. They will get immediate relief when they go to the stores. And it's looking at property tax relief, which the constituents I represent are desperate for. I have not had one single email or phone call regarding income tax reduction, but I have had hundreds and continue to have hundreds of emails begging me to address the property tax concern they have, and also to look at the sales tax on groceries. And the problem is, we can sit here and say, well, there's more tax cuts to come. But the reality is, once this bill goes through, we can't claw that money back. That money has been taken care of. And so that $350 million one time, we can't use it for other needs that the state desperately wants and needs. And some of those are, our districts have over $218 million in levies. Think of what we could do if we sent that money out per pupil into the formula. We could pay off those levies, every single one. And the districts that don't have one, because they probably couldn't pass one, they would have additional funds to deal with maintenance in their buildings. We just had an OPE study released, and it's shocking what the state our school buildings are in. The majority of them are in fair to poor repair. That should concern all of us. That's where we send our children every day. Another thing, another need that we have heard from our rural communities is their emergency services aren't being funded. Think about that. No ambulance service if you have a heart attack. Those things we could address. We could put $30 million towards that and help those rural communities out. It's not just about doing a tax reduction. It's about making sure we get the right one and that we are benefiting our communities for the future and making sure that in the generations to come, our children are going to be in a good place. And so I would urge you to vote no on this bill and to come back with a few different components in it. I think maybe we can do a little bit of everything this year, but there hasn't really even been any discussion of what should be included in a tax reduction bill. It was presented to us on day one with very little input from the public or from fellow legislators. So I urge your no vote on this. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Burgoyne.
Thank you, Madam President. The surplus, to the extent that there is one, should be returned to our people. I don't think any of us disagree on that. What I do think we disagree on is how to do it. There's a couple of things that come to mind. First off, if the rebate was put up by itself, I'm not sure how I'd vote on it, but I might vote for it, the rebate piece of this. And the reason is that people should get their money back to the extent that we can do that. But it's interesting. The rebate is graduated, but income tax cut after income tax cut over the years is making our income tax less and less graduated and more flat. So why are we graduating the rebate with the 12% kicker? So if I pay $20,000 in state income tax, I get 12% of that. Okay? And somebody who pays zero in income tax gets 12% of that. This is not a flat rebate in an environment where we are moving to a flat tax. In other words, this is people who are well off saying, heads I win, tails you lose. And that's the problem with these tax cuts year after year after year. Who gets the benefit? The people at the top. it's claimed, well, that's only fair because they're the ones paying the tax. Well, the median family income is $60-some thousand a year. Those people pay tax. They get back a little bit, a very little bit. Other people walk away with $8,000 or more a year. Plus they get a graduated share of the rebate. So I think that's an inequity. Where did this surplus come from? It comes from a stronger than expected economy. There's no question about that. There's a structural component to this quote-unquote surplus, but it also comes from the 5% holdback we had in 2020 from the gentleman on the second floor. And we had appropriated money we thought was necessary to spend, and we held back 5% of it. And that's because Idaho government is badly underfunded. And that made it worse. People deserve to get their surplus money back, but they deserve good schools. They deserve good public safety. They deserve basic, limited government that is capable, functional, competent, and can get the job done. And I think we all understand that on one of our very most important obligations as a legislature, we have great difficulty doing what we need to do in education. So, it is said that there are bills on their way to us to cut property taxes. This bill spends $600 million. How much will be left over to fund meaningful property tax relief? If we cut property taxes in this state with a benefit for renters, the cost will be roughly in the $500 million range ongoing, just like the $600 million for this bill is ongoing. I don't think we're going to get both. I think we're going to get one at the end of the day. There have been promises for years, campaign and otherwise, that there would be a grocery tax cut in the wake of the grocery tax cut that was passed and vetoed by the former governor. But you know, it's really interesting how they never materialize. Promises kept or broken? What will it be this year? What will it be this session? Promised property tax relief? Will that promise be kept or broken? Just ask yourself, if a $500 million property tax relief bill comes your way, can you vote for this bill and vote for that bill? And that's about what it will take to cut property taxes 25%. Now, I understand in your area, 25% cut may look pretty big. In my area, it's not going to look so big, and there are other parts of the state where it will be somewhere in between. Here's how I look at income tax. In the 1930s, there was a bank robber named Willie Sutton. And Willie got arrested. He got caught and he had to go to jail. And a reporter asked Willie, why do you rob banks? And his answer was, because that's where the money is. Well, do we really mean to support the necessary governmental expenditures of this state with a flat tax? And if we do we really think that this approach over time is going to yield us the revenue that we will need to do the job that should be done? Let me just give you an example. As many of you know, I've spent my legislative career very wrapped up in criminal justice issues. We have a great deal of difficulty in many parts of this state, and I would dare say in over half of the geography of this state, of paying law enforcement officers a sufficient wage to get the quality of people and the quantity of people that law enforcement needs and wants. Now, public safety is basic. If you can't do public safety and do it right, government's not open for business. The first obligation of government is physical security. A government that cannot monopolize violence in society and provide physical security to its citizens is not a government. So, yes, we have disagreements about whether government should be this size or this size. Most people in Idaho favor limited government. Most people in the country favor limited government. We disagree about what that is. But we can't disagree that public safety is foundational for government. And we're doing an extremely poor job of properly funding law enforcement in this state. And that's just one example. Another thing about the income tax. I had a law firm. I managed it. Made decisions with my partners about what we were going to pay employees. Business owners, we took home a good living. Our employees were paid less. And like most business people, we were successful because of the public infrastructure that our community, our local community, and our community, the state community, provided that allowed us to flourish. And we, the owners of that business, took home more money than our employees did, which is normal in any business. And we benefited from that public infrastructure financially more than they did. And that's why we pay more taxes. And that's why graduated income taxes make sense. Because even with a higher tax rate, my return on investment was a good return on investment as weighed against my taxes. We always, what's the old saying? Don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the guy behind the tree. Well, if the guy behind the tree doesn't have any money, Willie Sutton's going to leave him alone, and so's the tax commission, and we're not going to get any revenue. This isn't going to take us anywhere. And we're not going to get more tax relief of any significance out of this session if we pass this bill. If I'm wrong about that, you'll prove me wrong, and I'll be happy. And I'll admit that, and I'll eat my words. But there have just been too many promises over the years that haven't been kept. And that's why I'm voting no today. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
President.
Senator Vick.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of this piece of legislation, even though I, like the senator from 28, it's not exactly what I ordered. I still think it's a good piece of legislation. It does things that I support, lowering taxes, reducing the number of brackets, simplifying our tax code. I also like the fact that there's a minimum rebate. The senator from 16 said if you pay $0 in taxes, you get 12% of that back. That's not quite true. Everybody gets $75. And so there is a minimum rebate because everybody pays taxes. I think everybody should participate in a tax cut. And in the rebate portion of this, they do. I hope to follow up with a piece of legislation that increases the grocery tax credit. And I believe you'll see that later. And that will give ongoing tax relief to every resident of the state of Idaho. So I think those are, when you put those together, we have a pretty good slate of tax relief. I have always supported and still continue to support the repeal on the tax on food. But again, I've learned my 12th year here that you don't always get just what you want. But a couple comments on taxes in general. I do get complaints both on our income tax rate and our property taxes. But so I did a little bit of research. We actually have 26 states in this country that have lower income taxes. 9 states have no income tax. So Idaho, even with our reputation as being a low tax state, we are in the top half of the states in the country for our income taxes. But on property taxes, there are only 13 states with lower property taxes than Idaho. So 36 states and the District of Columbia all have higher property taxes than we do. And this is residential on your primary residence. So we're not talking overall property taxes. And both of the statistics I'm giving you are from WalletHub. So I do get complaints on property taxes, but in terms to a national average, we do fairly well on property taxes. Property taxes have their own issues concerns that I have with them, but in relation to the rest of the nation, we do fairly well when it comes to our property tax rates. And there's also been some discussion on what's fair when it comes to income taxes. My personal philosophy is a tax system that penalizes success is not appropriate. If we have a flat tax, and let's say we had a 5% flat tax, you make $100, you pay $5. You make $100,000, you pay $5,000. So as you make more, you pay more. I think that's fair, but you don't have to pay extra because you are successful. And so I do believe this piece of legislation moves us in the right direction. If I had my choice, I would have eliminated one of the lower tax brackets. But again, that's not the bill we have before us. But overall, I think this is a good piece of legislation. And I do want to make one final comment, and that is that it's been stated that this permanently, or at least until we change it, removes revenue from state government. I think that's a good thing. If you believe in limited government, then one way to limit the size of government is to limit their resources and what they can spend. Because as we see, Idaho is fairly disciplined, but even here we spend most of what comes in. And so if you truly want limited government, limit what's available to spend, and you'll limit the size of government. And I think this is good, and I think that's why it's important that it's early, that we're doing this early in the session, is for that very reason. So it takes that money off the table and returns this money, which is not our money. This money belongs to the people who work here and live here and they should have it back in their pocket, even if they don't truly appreciate the check for $75 or even remember it. It's still their money, and they should be able to keep it in their pocket. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Madam President,
Senator Riggs.
debate in favor of the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you. In the history of the state of Idaho, we've had tax increases, tax reductions, shortfalls, surpluses, and no shortage of ideas on the best approach to collecting, spending, and redistributing these funds. But when I have discussions about this specific tax bill and whether or not it is the wisest course of action, the thing that I am left considering is the giant word if. A lot of folks that I've had conversations with, whether they're citizens I represent or members of the Senate, a lot of the times the debate comes back to if things aren't as good next year, if we spend it this way, if we do that. And while there is a good amount of consideration that needs to be put into these things, at some point we must say we believe this is currently the best agreed to course of action. And what I mean by that is, by nature of being a senator in this body, we are all up for election every 2 years, including this coming spring. There may be no tax legislation for any of us in this session or in the future. We have to look at not what is the best plan for the future for the people of Idaho, but what are the opportunities that we can seize when they are in front of us. And this is not, I think, as we have seen, a perfect bill that solves all issues for all concerned parties, but it is a good bill that will provide financial relief back to the people who have given this money to the state of Idaho to hold and spend on their behalf. And we have done that, including budget requests this year for significant increases in pay for all of our services, public services, protective services, teachers, and the like. There are significant budgetary items that have been put into consideration, and we still have a significant amount of money left over with which we cannot agree on the best course of action to spend that money. Therefore, the wisest course of action right now is to return that money back to its rightful owner, which is the people. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Thane.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a short comment. Seems like my whole lifetime, so just not in the time I've been in the Senate, but government officials and elected officials have wanted to address the concerns in the communities that our people are facing. And what we've tried to do for over 100 years is to fund the agencies of government to take care of these problems. And I think that feeling is still with us today, that we're thinking if we just spend more money on another program or increase the budgets of this agency or that agency, maybe our mental health problems and different things will be solved. But what we've been doing in actuality is creating and strengthening the institutions of government to replace families and the responsibility of families rather than build the capacity of families to solve their own problems. Now, this bill doesn't really get deep into how we can help families solve their own problems. One of those ways is to have access to greater resources, and simply giving them back some of their resources is a good first step. I'll be supporting the bill. Thank you, Madam President.
Is there further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Stinnett.
Thank you, Madam President. I also looked at Wallentub, as the good senator from 2 did, and it says we are 36th in the tax burden, and that is extraordinary considering that we're one of the states that has all 3 of the taxes: income, property, and sales tax. What we are is second most expensive after Utah for property taxes. And I have heard, and we've heard for years now, that property taxes are what's burdening people the most. And with the escalation of what's happening with inflation, we're seeing that in gas and in food, and that's the second thing that I keep hearing so much about. When you look at what needs to be done, and I agree, it's their money, but is their money going to serve them at $75? Or are we going to find workforce housing? Or get off the bottom of being 49th in the K through 12 facilities maintenance? Or listen to the 70% of Idahoans who want full-time kindergarten? Or make sure we get child care back to people so they can go back to work? Or protect law enforcement and give them training and resources, or our emergency services, or funding the EMS needs for underserved areas, which directly impacts people at a very personal and direct level? Are we going to make sure that state employees receive the amount of money in their wages increase? 5% does not meet even inflation. Are we going to fix 2000 Bridge, deemed unfit to travel under, and that is a public safety issue? Or millions of miles of roads that are in disrepair? Unfortunately, I am told by the rural roads highway districts that my area has the worst bridges and roads in the whole state. Lucky me. Are we going to fix them? It's a public safety issue. Are we going to make sure that we even do a partial or a full repeal on grocery taxes to have direct relief to people who need it most? Are we going to make sure that the existing state child tax credit is refundable? Are we going to increase the homeowner's exemption and peg it to house costs? Are we going to make sure that we double the opportunity for property tax assistance in programs? Will we be distributing funds to school districts so that we can pay down their bonds and levies, which directly help property owners and their taxes? We'll be distributing the current balance of the internet sales tax back to local governments instead of putting it in a tax relief fund where it is directly impactful to the services of the people they serve. You know, folks, when we look at what we can do with $75 and what we can do if we do a thoughtful opportunity for the greater majority of Idahoans, it is a unique opportunity to fix ailing infrastructure that is failing. If we continue to not put resources into, it'll be too austere and cease to function. And some of what we say, yes, I'm pleased to see some of the amounts that are going to it, but you cannot fix a bridge, one bridge, with what we're talking about that we're sending to some of these places. It certainly is a small token and a start, but it is not meaningful for fixing what is old, what is antiquated, what needs to be built with the growth, and all the levels of infrastructure we're seeing that's impacting the state today. And then maybe after that, when we've done it well and there's something left, maybe then we can look at an income tax refund. Thank you, Madam President.
Is there further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Groh.
To debate the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the comments that have been made here today. I don't plan to repeat several of the things that I would have said. Excellent points that have been made. But let me just make this comment to begin. I think people are getting a skewed perspective of what's going to happen in this legislative session because this bill happens to be one of the first bills out of the chute. I, along with several here on this floor, get to work in another area where we look at the entire picture and look at all of the different budgets. And I'm working on several with you where we're going to have a lot of money going to education, a lot of money going to transportation, all these other issues have been mentioned. This bill is not a redistribution of wealth bill. This isn't to help the poor or anyone else. This is a bill that directed at giving back to the workers and the producers excess money that they've already paid into the state. It's their money, and I feel great that we're making an effort to give them some of that money back and also to reduce the tax rates for the workers, both the owners of corporations, corporate and LLCs and partnerships and individuals so that we can be competitive with other states. As we Utah was mentioned earlier. I've noticed, I track what they're doing down there as well. Their rate has been 5% for income tax, both corporate and individual, and they've already reduced it down to 4.85, and they plan to reduce it down some more in the House. We're competing with all these other states around us. And at the median income level, our particular tax puts us at a very high rate. And we've always talked about the fact that Idaho has a three-legged stool: the income tax, the property tax, and the sales tax. And the one that seems most out of whack right now as compared to other states is the income tax. And so we're addressing that one first. Other things will be addressed. The property tax bills are coming down the pike. So I wouldn't get overly worried about this being the first bill and thinking that everything's been spent. There's a lot of money still to be allocated out for the needs that have been mentioned. So I recommend that we support this bill and give back to the people of Idaho, the workers, the producers, the excess money that they've paid in. Rather than increasing state government, we're giving it back to the people. Therefore, I'm supporting this bill. Thank you, Madam President.
Is there further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Den Hartog.
Thank you, Madam President, to debate in favor of the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Fellow senators, we often get criticized towards the end of session when we consider pieces of tax legislation. So I find it interesting that we're here at the beginning of session debating a really important tax bill. And I think it's really exciting that we get to do this at the beginning of session, that we really get to have a thoughtful conversation and something that we know was in the works. And I think this is a good piece of legislation, and I share some of the same sentiments as the senator from 28 and the senator from 2. But that's how this process works, right? We never all get all the things that we want. The longer we're here, the more often we learn that. And I'm convinced the good Lord just thinks I need to learn that every year, so he teaches it to me in a new way. The other thing that I think is interesting about taxes as we debate the different types of taxes that we ask our citizens to pay is that we sometimes forget that when they write those checks, when they submit their forms, it's coming out of the same bank account. So whether it's an income tax or property tax or sales tax, it's all coming out of their same checking account. It's the same pocket. We talk about it like they are different things, but they have the same bottom line. It's the same tax. We have this discussion whether it's, they don't care which level of government we are, we're all the government. So whether it's a local government taxing them or the state taxing them, it's still coming out of their same bank account. So I'm proud to be able to support this piece of legislation and reduce taxes on the citizens of Idaho. And not only to do that, but to do that in a year, and I know we will see these things on the floor in the future, but to do that in a year where we're going to be making record investments in transportation and education, our public buildings, our public employees. I think we're going to be able to do a lot of the things that all of us care about that are really important to the citizens of the state of Idaho. I was excited to hear some of the comments on the floor today related to supplemental levies. As I look at the proposals for education, when I do a back of the napkin adding up what I see in the different proposals, it looks like we may have $300 million new dollars, new investment into education. And if that offsets the $218 million that are currently being levied through supplemental levies, I hope we see a reduction in supplemental levies. And I hope that we go back and, have that level of expectation that if the state is stepping up and putting new investments into education, that we can reduce property taxes. So, Madam President, fellow senators, I hope you can support this piece of legislation.
Is there further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Wintrow.
Thank you, Madam President and Senators. Just briefly, because we're all hungry. I really appreciate the debate, and I wasn't going to debate, but I would feel remiss because of all the phone calls and emails that I've received from my constituents. And I really appreciate what the senator from 22 just said. However, I do think the bank account percentage is a little different for some folks, and I'm reminded of the number of phone calls that I've been getting at my desk from folks who are in their 70s and 80s who are struggling and are telling me, Melissa, my income is not that high, and so the income tax isn't going to benefit me, but I'm being bankrupted out of my home and I can't pay my property taxes. And so they're just begging for us to address that. So I hope that we do address it, but I guess I see this issue more as what I think we should do first. And I know when we counsel folks about procrastination, we always say, do the most important thing first. Get that done. And so in this case, I would ask us to do that first, then reinvest in education, reinvest in our infrastructure, reinvest in our state employees to really combat our workforce shortage, reinvest in our citizens in a way they want and need. And then I hope there would be some left again to do some income tax reduction. But to me, it's about doing what I think my constituents want me to do first to reduce their stress in this economy. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Madam President.
Senator Winder.
I'll give the excuse I didn't intend a debate, because I didn't. But I've heard some things here today that I think people need to look at the bigger picture. There was a plan put together that we heard about during the State of the State called Leading Idaho. It goes through and talks about all the various things that will be done for local government to help them with their bridges, to help them with their roads, $800 and some million for clean water. Just think about the impact that has across our state to lower property taxes for all the citizens of Idaho, particularly those smaller rural communities that cannot afford the rate increase, cannot afford to go borrow the money. This is going to be significant investment in the future of Idaho, and I think you all need to take a look at the bigger picture and not just bemoan that we're giving a little bit of back to the people. It's $250 million ongoing. That's all it is. 350 one time, and everybody benefits. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator Rice is recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Madam President. You know, I could spend a few minutes talking about monetary policy and economics, but I'd like everybody to be awake to vote on the bill. I kind of recreationally read things like Milton Friedman treatises on monetary policy. What we are seeing is something that is the result of a number of different things all going on at once. One of them is the stimulus that we had 3 of. One of those is also the 2018 tax cuts that are still impacting investment in manufacturing and business throughout our country, and including Idaho. But what we do know is that as of a month or so ago, we had $1.9 billion in collected dollars we didn't expect from our taxes, state revenues. That's gone up. This takes $350 million of that and returns it to people who paid it. I personally think that checking account that my good friend from 22 referred to is what's most important. It's the most important thing because it's what pays for everything. Government does not produce 1 penny of what it spends. It's all coming out of that single checkbook that pays property tax, sales tax, and income tax. And yes, we do get circumstances and times when there may be just one of those that's being paid, but that one that's being paid is going to end up being sales tax, because there are people that don't directly pay property tax, and there are people that don't directly pay income tax. But one of the principles of economics is that no matter what the tax is, it's going to get redistributed in the economy, and everybody bears the burden of it. So we put first things first, and we take care of that checkbook, and we give a little bit back. But that leaves us well over $1.5 billion of accumulated funds, and revenues coming in at a rate that is 23% higher than it was coming in before. We take a little bit of that ongoing money and we give it back to citizens. If you look at that reduction of that top rate from 6.5% to 6%, that's an 8% cut, or roughly 8% cut in the rate. But one of the things I've learned is rates don't equal revenues. When you stop taxing too high, you get more activity and more profits, and those end up increasing revenues at a different rate than you had before. This is a good bill. We'll get to some really good things, but we have a single subject rule. So here's a couple of things that you can't include in this bill that I think are important. Funding transportation deferred maintenance to the amount listed in the Moving Idaho Forward study. That's $200 million ongoing. That's for state and local roads. But we can't include it in this bill, even though property tax dollars get used for some of that maintenance. And so we'll get that done, and that'll affect property tax. It's already been mentioned that our investment in education this year will affect property tax, and I hope that's true. But we'll do other things. There's a large amount that we will be dealing with to do things for our local governments that'll affect what they need to do for our citizens. Thank you, Madam President. Debate is closed.
Debate being closed, the question is, shall House Bill 436 pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Hagenbrod. Anthen. Bayer. Blair. Burgoyne. Burtonshaw. Cook. Crabtree. Den Hartog. Grow. Guthrie. Harris. Hyder. Lakey. Lee. Lent. Lodge. Martin. Nelson. Nye. Patrick. Rice. Ricks. Riggs. Semmelroth. Souza. Stennett. Thane. Van Orden. Vick. Ward Engelking. Winder. Wintrow. Woodward. Cito. Lent.
Roll call shows 27 aye, 7 nay, 1 absent and excused. A majority having voted in the affirmative, House Bill number 436 has passed the Senate. Is there a correction to the title? Hearing none, the title is also approved, and House Bill number 436 will be returned to the House of Representatives.